I'm guessing it has started, so you can continue.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Think I'm seeing a new person that just joined the call. So that's James. You are welcome. Um, okay, let me first share my screen before introduce us to today's class and also some circumstances surrounding today's class also. So let me first share my screen. Uh, so hope you all can see my screen, right? Confirm if you get.
Yes, yes, you can
All
see
right,
your screen.
awesome. So I mean, today's class is kind of like a very tricky one because I'm like here where I'm staying rain fair yesterday. So following that, like we've not been having light up to this moment. And I mean I've been hoping we have light for me to charge my laptop. So as you all can see, like I'm on a very low battery in my laptop right now. So for that reason I'm gonna make today class to be as brief as possible. So but notwithstanding, I mean, like I've already had deliberation with Mrs. Temitope regarding whether we should adjust to the class or we should just go ahead to do something. But she said something that it's too late to actually postpone the class, so which is something very worth of considering. But however, I'm gonna try my best to make sure that our time is gonna worth it regardless. Okay. So and today's topic is a very interesting one actually. That is API and JSON, like how to work with API and JSON. So it's a very interesting topic in mobile development sphere. Okay. So okay. So let me first lay the platform down. That is how we are going to go about the class given the present condition, right? So there's another issue aside the issue of flight. Okay, I'm currently working on a project. I'm working on a project. This is the back end of the project. So this
Please confirm. Can anyone still hear Mr. Rashid?
okay. All
Okay,
right.
can hear you now.
So a call came in. So
All right.
that was why I got disconnected. All right.
Okay.
So yeah, I was saying something that I was that uh, sorry for the interruption. I have to put my phone on flight mode. Like call was coming in intermittently. So yeah, after installing a package, I upgraded my Flutter from 3.27 to 3.29. That is the latest version of Flutter. And what follows that was that I mean, all the when you do Flutter upgrade, like all Flutter dependencies, what Flutter depends on, we also have to be upgraded along. So that process took about more than 2 hours. If you can see the timing here. So and it has not completed actually. I guess it should be a network issue anyway. So and the challenge that posed to us is that I cannot run the program. Like if I should try to run a program, for the fact that I've not had all Flutter dependency set up, after I upgraded to a new version, the program will break. So there's another project I was working on. So this particular one, this one, like it couldn't run when I tried to start it. It broke because of the fact that my Gradle is having issue. That is a Flutter, dependencies. So because of these two reasons, light issue on Flutter, my Flutter dependency not fully set. What I'm going to do in today's class is I will just like walking you guys through some code. So hopefully in our next class I must have settled everything. So we will dive deeper in what we ought to have done today. So so that being said, so now let's go to introduction of today's topic. So today's topic is API and JSON. So basically, as I said earlier, they are very interesting topic, and aside the fact being very interesting, they're also very crucial topic when it comes to mobile app development, or as a front-end engineer. There's something you must have a good hang of, okay? So because when you come to think of it, as a mobile developer or front-end developer, your role, your one of your basic goal as a Flutter developer is to be able to consume back end, like able to integrate back end API in your application and also manage states. So these are the two responsibilities you ought to have. You ought to have a very good proficiency in as a Flutter developer or mobile developer, because when you think of it, like any client application we are dealing with, that is what I mean by that is being it web application or mobile application. So if you look at it, like what is basically happening is you sending requests and receiving requests. For example, when you're using e-commerce application, right? When you press on you place an order. When you place an order, a request is sent to the backend based on the item you are purchasing. So and you can also get some orders like the products you are seeing. I mean, a request was being set for you to see the product. I mean, the product rather through a get request. So the point I'm trying to make here is that basically mobile application deep down in a not like deep down what it entails is sending and make for your mobile application to be dynamic. What it entails is you have to be work you don't I mean you have to work with some server, like some backend application, right? So and through that you need to be sending and receiving responses in between. So that is what makes this topic to be very, very important one. So there's another one. I mean, there's another term there, right? They call it. I mean, we call it API, which stands for Application Programming Interface. Before I move on, like let me confirm if you all are still hearing me. Are we all still together?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. So there's another topic right there called API, which stands for Application Program or Application Programming Interface. So I mean, to some of us here, it might not be a strange word. Why for some of us that just started our career in tech, so it might be kind of like a strange word also. But then in tech, there's something very common in tech. Like they use buzzwords like I love buzzwords. They use buzzwords a lot, okay, but when you narrow it down, it actually means a very simple thing. So this API of a thing is one of them. Like API is something very, very simple application. So the point you have to like dwell on there from the full meaning, application programming interface, is that last one, interface. So API just means an interface that you play around with to have access to something hidden deep down there, okay. So what I mean is this. For instance, now I want to let's even start from this Flutter we are making use of right now. This Flutter code that I'm writing now, like all this Flutter code here, they are actually, I mean, I'm actually playing with Flutter API. I'm playing with Flutter API to be able to be doing all these things. Flutter engineer builds their Flutter projects and holds the repository on GitHub. I used to say this almost all the time, right? So Flutter is a project hosted on GitHub repo out there. So this one we are doing now is that what's actually happening is that Flutter gives us some toolkits, some libraries, some frameworks, some classes and some widgets, okay, to be able to have access to some basic functionalities. So those things that are given to us to have access to something hidden out there, like something that is being contained right there from the actual these Flutter engineers, is what we call API. So for me to drive the point home or to make it very relatable, okay. So let's just use I'm looking around to see something I can so right now like my eye is on socket, okay. So let me make this reference. Maybe hopefully you'll be able to get it better. So there's a socket here right now. The socket is 3-pin plug, right? So basically what I do with it is that I plug my laptop. If there's like now, I'll plug my laptop to it and my laptop will be charging, isn't it? So you see, I only care about the function, right? That is for me to plug my laptop and for my laptop to start charging. But underneath the hood, there's something running out there. Like I can plug my laptop in another hood and nothing will happen, right? Because the mechanism or the underneath working mechanism is different for the two hoods. For sockets, it supports my laptop to charge, but for another ordinary hole out there, that is not what it is meant for. So in the socket, there is some connection, genuine connection that makes sure that my laptop, the socket should be charging my laptop. But I don't have to care about that connection. I'm not an engineer. I'm actually an engineering student, but I don't have to care about the connection going out there, right? All I care about is for me to be able to use the pin, those 3 pin exposed to me. So that is exactly what is happening in API. That is when you talk about API. APIs are built by back-end developers. Okay, back-end developers built an API for you, like this OpenAI API. That is the one through which we used to access ChatGPT and Weather API and many other APIs like that. So you don't have to care about how the back-end developer that built it, the kind of magic he does, the different technology he put into place. You're a bit less concerned about that. So all you care about is how to make use of it. So when it comes to how to make use of it, they call them API documentation. Okay. So API documentation is a detailed documentation of how the API works. The API documentation of Flutter is what we go through before we could start writing Flutter application. I think okay, let's just reference to it. So that is what they call Flutter doc, okay? Flutter documentation. Whoop. What's going on? Let me try it again. Flutter documentation. There. Okay, let me confirm the capture. Okay, so you see, this is Flutter documentation, right? So when we go into it, we see how to get started, API docs. You see, that's what I'm saying. API docs, they have cookbook and all. So the Flutter engineer have already built this for us. So, but we don't know what they did out there, right? So they have to give us, the technical know-how. That is how we should be able to make use of the API they built for us. So that is basically how all API works. When the backend developer or whosoever built a particular API, they will give you a documentation on how to integrate or consume or make use of that API. So so that is basically how it works. To this point, I want to know if all of us have a good understanding of what is meant by API right now. So is there any of us that still don't understand what that term means from the little explanation I'm giving so far? Or do we all understand what is meant by API at this point? We can just react, send some reactions. Awesome. Okay, good to know. All right, so basically that is all about API. Then this API, they come in different forms. Okay, there are some API that before you can access them, you need something called API key. Just as it sounds, like key for you to access the API. Consider API like OpenAI API, like the one that powered ChatGPT. Maybe you want to build a smart application, an AI-powered application. So it requires you to make use of OpenAI API, right? So yourself can imagine how cumbersome, like how robust that OpenAI API is. So it's not something you can have access to just like that, like for free, just like that, right? A lot of work has gone into it. So, you actually have to have some, there are some condition around it based on the usage. So because of that, you have an API key. Most of those API that used to have API key are usually paid one. There are a lot of companies out there. What they do is they call it software as a service, right? So they give you pay to have access to some API that you can use to power your application. So throughout your career, you are going to make use of API like as often as possible. So it should definitely be your going into. Okay, so you should better start getting familiar with it. Yeah, so they are of different type. There are some that require an API key. Usually your duty, your one of your responsibilities as a Flutter developer is to go through API documentation as thorough as you can, okay, before you start consuming them. For instance, now like I was working on this project. Let me see if I open it. Okay, give me a minute. Okay, I just want to show you something. So one second. What's going on? Okay, so I just want to use this to explain something. So this a current project I'm working on, right? So I mean, as a mobile developer, I told you your responsibility is to be going through API documentation as thorough as you can. Because before you start integrating API into your application, you have to understand how the developer expect you to actually make use of it. Okay. So this is an API that I'm using for, one of the application I'm building. So you see, we have a create user endpoint. All this one, like we get to them. So, but the point I just want to make here is that you will read thoroughly through API documentation. Any API you want to use, be it whether API, open or you want to build AI application using open AI API or whatever API you are dealing with. So first thing first is to go through their documentation, learn, thoroughly go through how it is being said to be used, okay? So where to make a post request, get request and all, okay? So that is how you deal with it. So now let's go to the actual structure of it. That is how you deal with API in Flutter application. So for the aforementioned reasons, that is the fact that my Flutter is not currently working as expected. What I'm going to do here is to show us theoretically how to deal with API. So hopefully if I have I will try to create time to make up for this session because this one is more or less of fulfilling all righteousness. The condition was very unfavorable. That is surrounding conditions, no power, and my Flutter package was having issue at the same time. So hopefully I'll make up for this class, but to just make our time worth it, I'm going to show us theoretically how you deal with an API so that it will serve as a platform for you to explore or make your own research before we get to the actual work of it, okay? Because what you're going to do in next class is to build a mini application, probably web application or whatever, so that shows how we make API requests, use it in our software application or no. But in this class, I'll just show you from the project I've worked on, okay, how I deal with it, okay? So to that end, let's start from here. So I also write backend code. This is another application I was working on. So I was the one writing the backend application also. That is building the APIs, right? So I told you backend guys actually all they do is to build API for a particular application. Okay. So you see, before you start, the reason why I'm showing all this one is that it's while it is not requirement or incumbent for you to actually be a backend engineer before you can start working with API. Like it's not a requirement at all. I love you can be a front-end engineer or Flutter developer without having to know anything about backend. Okay. So, but I'm all for usually it make it more you get to understand it to an in-depth level if you know how things work. That is in backend sphere. That is how things operate out there in backend and development. So it makes you to fully understand a lot of jargons or terminologies in in the front end perspective. Okay, so that is why like I'm trying to like take us from the origin, that's the origin of the API, which is from backend developer side to the front end, so that we can actually see things in more detail. So this application is for e-commerce application. Okay, so in e-commerce application, first thing you have to have a user site. That is, users should be able to sign in into the application to browse through different categories out there, different products out there, be able to place an order, add item to cart and all. So the application is still in progress, but because of that is, I'm telling you how they think through creating API. Okay, so you first figure out what your application is doing. So I've already, like, from what I just said now, we've already known that there's that part of user, right? So in that part of user, first thing first, like I think about the authentication, like how users should access my application. Definitely they have to sign up or create an account, right? So that is why I created this model. So I think of what I need of them, like what should I require from the user before they sign into my application. So first thing, I need their full name. So that is the reason why I have it included here. Full name. I just said it should be a string type. That is you all should know what is meant by string. Then I made it require they must enter it before they could proceed. So don't forget, if you don't get this one, don't be bothered by it. I just add them here so to cater for the white spaces. Then another thing that I required of them is email. Then and another one is their state, their city, their locality, password, and so that was all. So these are the things that a user will have to fill before they can create account in my application. So when I'm now writing a documentation for this API that I've built now, when I'm writing, okay, let me take us to the router. This is the auth router, right? So where I created an endpoint to be able to create a user. So this part is very important. It's very important. Like this is the end. They call this one endpoint, API/sign up. So when a Flutter developer is consuming this API that I've built, when they are integrating it in their own application, they have to query it, okay, or fetch the data in the backend, because all these data will put them back to the database, right? So the Flutter developer will have to like query the API using this endpoint, this API URL that I created. So that is basically how it works. All APIs have their own data model, which is like the structure of the kind of data user will be getting or sending. It is two-way things, right? You can either send a data to a database or you get a data from database. So all those parts will be decided by the backend engineer based on the data structure. Okay. Then after that, the backend engineer will now develop a router, okay, for you that contains the endpoint through which, the front end guy, that should be the mobile developer, query the backend. Okay. So there's a lot of things here, right? So, but the one I only want you to care about is this endpoint and the fact that this API request is a post. It's a post request. So there's what they call CRUD operation. Okay. I don't know. Some people call it CRUD. Why some call it CRUD? The spelling is let me just type the spelling here on my terminal. CRUD. Okay, so this is a term used to express the working principle of backend or APIs or let's say backend. Okay, in nutshell. So in backend, what's or that is, as a backend developer, almost what you do almost most of the time is this called operation. Okay, and what it means is that's C, or let me create a new folder to just type some dummy text. Okay, let's use the end of this one. So I made mention of CRUD, right? CRUD. So CRUD operations. So the CDS stands for create. Okay. Create. The RDS stands for grid. Okay. Okay, I have I'm using Copilot. You see, the thing is very handy, right? It's giving me auto suggestion. We have updates, and the last one is delete. So this is what's called operation signifier. Okay, in API development, these are the operations you most likely to be doing. You either create, that is kind of like creating a new user into a database, right? For example, as a new user, we ourselves we want to sign into an application for the first time, right? You create an account, so that is where create has to come in. So, and in technological term or in programming term, when you are creating an API, the method you use to create something into a database is post method. Okay, I really love this auto suggestion, this Copilot I'm using. Like, it's very effective. It has known what I'm dealing with, so, and it gave me like suggestion appropriately. So you use post method to create a new user or a new to put a new thing into a database. You use post requests. Okay, that is when you want to create something inside. For example, I want to create a new user into a database of my application. I'll make a post request. That is time used for creating this post. Okay, that is kind of like I'm posting a new request. Okay, what if I want to get a new request? Like, after I built my application, right? There are some products. There are some product I want user to see. That is when user first visit my application, they should be able to see the available product. Meaning those products has already been saved in my database. I should be able to fetch them and display to user site. Kind of like, it's very similar to me trying to get something from the database, right? So they actually make the naming to be very intuitive. So the kind of request I have to make in this end, that is when I want to read what is inside the database or fetch what inside the database. The kind of request I make is called get request. Okay. Then what if I want to change what is already there? For instance, I've already created my username, right? My name is Rashid Yekini. Okay, not actually the footballer. Okay. So I created a new account in this application I'm building, and the name I use there is Rashid Yekini. I later feel like, oh, okay, let me use my nickname instead of my actual name. That is changing it to something like Mrash. So that is I want to change what was initially in the database, right? So that is where this update, meaning I want to update it. So the method you use there is put. You use put method, okay? So whenever you see put, just know that they are changing what is already inside the database. What if I want to delete my account? I'm no longer interested in the application I'm dealing with. That is this application that I signed into earlier. I'm no longer interested in having an account with them. I want to delete my account. So what method do we use? You use delete, okay? So these are different. There are still more to this. There's a patch method, and there's a patch method also. But most 90% of the time, these are the method you be making use of. Okay, delete, put, get, and post through. So this is basically it. Okay, so that takes me back to our backend application. So you see now, for user to sign up, the type of API is post. The type of request is post request. Okay, so when user is trying to create an account, they'll make a post request. I'll soon take us to the Flutter part of the application to see how we are making such a request. So in API, what exactly do we care about? We as a Flutter developer, what exactly do we care about? You know, already told us we don't need to care about all this gibberish I'm writing here, like all this all this code that I'm writing here. You as a Flutter developer, you don't really have to care about. You only need to care about what this my API is returning. What are you getting from this API, and what kind of response? Okay. For you to fully understand that, because I'm not writing a documentation for this my API, so I will go back to the documentation I earlier opened to explain it. For instance, this application, I am working on it. I'm not the backend developer. So I don't know, and I don't care to know how the backend developer builds the backend, okay? But I want to build the application. I'm the one building the Flutter application, the mobile interface. First thing first, I told you, you start with documentation, right? So I have the documentation. I read through it. The first thing we have here, they said create user, right? That is if you want to create new user. So they said method. What kind of method are we using? Is it post or get or put. So we already explained all this one now. So this is how they are, like this is how you put them together. All those concepts we just learned, this is how you put them together. This is the post method. So what comes to your mind? Are you creating new user? Are you creating new thing inside the database? So because you are creating a new user, definitely we are using post request. That is why the backend developer that wrote this documentation for us instruct us to make use of post request before we could create a new user. So if backend developer or API documentation tells you to use post requests, and maybe out of your own curiosity or your own desire, right, you decide to use get requests, you fall into trouble, like you'll be in soup. All right. You must strictly adhere to what the backend guide told you or what the API documentation tells you. Another thing there is the path height. You know, I've also, these are the things you need to I need to query or to get access to the data I'm expecting for this from this API. Another part is the path, that is the URL, right? So the URL here is auth.register. The path is of two types. There is a base URL and there is a path. Okay, the base URL of this my API is let me go to my postman. This is the base URL. API staging get flux it. Okay, you see, I mean, to some of us that is kind of like familiar with how things work in programming, you must be wondering when I just show you something in the earlier thing, in the earlier part, the earlier stuff that I show you, that is the part that is just /auth/ register. You might be wondering that how will the communication protocol happen without HTTPS? Definitely there will be a base URL. You know, like the modality through which communication is made in computer is through HTTP.